Greetings, dearest remnant. I'd like to present to you today an updated eschatological timeline based on Daniel 8, Daniel 12, and these are the prophecies of the 2300 days, the 1290 days, and the 1335 days. I believe these timelines end at the very end of days, which is the time that we are in, Satan's little season. They do not end at the second coming of Yeshua, as many biblical scholars have determined. Now, some of you may have noticed that the comments on this channel have been disabled. Unfortunately, I had to disable them due to trolls. However, please feel free to email me if you have questions, comments, or if you want to send me any information, or if you just want to discuss and connect with someone who is open to seeing and understanding what most people don't. May Yeshua HaMashiach bless, watch over, and protect each and every one of you, especially in these last days. So let's move on to the timeline. And as indicated in the title of this video, I start this timeline in the pre-Adamic period. That is the period before the creation of Adam. And I'm just going to say a few words about this because I really want to move this timeline to the present without getting into too much sticky detail, so that you can see the big picture of what it is that I am discerning and that I have been presenting on this channel ever since August of 2023. Now, before the creation of Adam, there was probably a period of millions of years. Now, some biblical scholars, including Clarence Larkin, in his commentary on the book of Revelation, believe that there was a pre-Adamic earth. According to Larkin, during that time, Satan was in charge of Yahweh's original creation. But then Satan led that original creation astray, resulting in the destruction of the original earth. Now, I am not sure if that is the case, because I've not studied this period in any great depth, but I hope to have the time to do that. My view at this stage is that the pre-Adamic earth was inhabited or was the domain of the fallen angels after they were cast down to earth from heaven following the mutiny in heaven that was led by Satan. And once they were cast to earth, they filled the earth with wickedry, and so Yahweh destroyed and made it void. That is why in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, the earth is void. I also believe that is why Satan was already on earth when Yahweh created the Garden of Eden and placed Adam within it. And of course the Garden of Eden was and is here on earth. I believe it is in the North Pole, as I have mentioned in previous videos. It is from this pre-Adamic period that some unexplained megalithic ruins originate, and pagan gods of the pre- and post-flood eras also originate in this time. The earth is void, which is part of the verses in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 and 2. Okay, that statement, the earth is void, suggests that the earth was already present at the time of Adam's creation. Okay, and here I'm actually talking about creation week. Okay, not obviously by the time Adam himself was created, the earth was here. However, the statement the earth was void indicates that the earth was already present before creation week before creation week even began. So here's the wording of Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 to 2 so that you can see what I'm talking about. And this is from the Sefer, which is the Bible that I use. In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the earth. And the Ruach Elohim moved upon the face of the waters. And Elohim said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So, and the earth was without form and void. Okay, which means the earth was created, and then it became without form and void. After it was created, how could it be created and then become without form and void? So it had been there, it became without form and void, and then after that, Yahweh said, "Let there be light," and his Ruach moved upon the waters. Okay, so that is one reason why many have discerned that there was something there which caused the earth to become without form and void. Okay? And that is where the understanding of a pre-Adamic earth, a pre-Adamic era comes from. In addition to this, okay? According to Clarence Larkin, and I'm putting a link, actually the link to the sacred texts has been in the description box for quite some time. And if you go to the sacred text website and just do a search for Clarence Larkin, Book of Revelation, you'll be able to pull up his commentary and read it. There's a lot of very interesting information in his commentary, so I really encourage you to look for that. Okay, again, go to the sacred text website, and the link is in the description box of this and most of the videos I have made within the last couple of months. Okay, go to that website and search for Clarence Larkin, Book of Revelation, and you will find his commentary. Okay, so according to Larkin, the waters of Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 were created for the original pre-Adamic earth, and these waters remained after the earth was destroyed and became formless and void. Okay, the wording of Genesis verse 1 to 2 suggests Yahweh did not appear to create the waters at that time. He had created them before, because verse 1 and 2 of Genesis 1 tell us that his Ruach, his spirit, moved upon the waters that were. If his spirit moved upon the water, it doesn't say that Yahweh created the waters. It just says his Ruach moved upon the waters. So the waters were already there. Okay. Now, Gary Wayne, who I'm sure many of you have heard of, he has done some research and presentation on the gap theory, which is what this is I'm actually talking about here. Okay, he goes into a whole lot more depth. I'm just giving an overview, a summary of this as a starting point for my updated eschatological or prophetic timeline. Okay, so you may want to just do a Google of Gary Wayne gap theory to listen to his discussion about this period. So the whole idea of there having been a previous creation prior to the creation of our era is actually also supported by evidence of various megalithic structures and other artifacts which date much further back than the roughly 6,000 years BC, which is basically the timeline where creation is said to start at around 6,000 BC. Okay, whereas these ruins and artifacts date much further back, some of them hundreds of thousands of years, and some of them even millions of years. And when one tries to understand this from a biblical standpoint, it just makes sense that the wording of Genesis actually confirms, that is, the wording of Genesis chapter 1 verses 1 to 2 confirms that there was a pre-Adamic earth. Okay? I've mentioned Clarence Larkin, and I will be actually referencing his work quite frequently, as maybe not that frequently, but I will be mentioning him again as I go through this timeline. Okay, so then around 5,550 BC, we can start this timeline with the creation of Adam. And the date of 5,550 BC is from the Greek LXX, which is the Septuagint. So what Genesis tells us really is that Adam was created in the second renewed earth, an earth that had been made void and then replenished. Okay? And I'd like you to take note of the fact that the creation date of 5,550 on this updated timeline is revised from the original 4,000 BC, which is the date that I started my previous timelines at. This revision is based on the Greek LXX, and I just want to put the Greek LXX screen up here for you to take a look. And I have to remember to include this in the description box. But this timeline, as you can see, starts at 5,554 BC. That is where the Greek Septuagint chronology dates creation. And, they've done a lot of research on this to arrive at that date, and I'm having a little trouble with this. There we go. What I wanted to do was just read here this short summary that they place in the footnote. So they write, the Masoretic text technology from Abraham to Adam was corrupted by Jews for anti-Christian theological reasons because they reject Yeshua. Okay, so timeline starting at around 4000 BC, which is based on the Masoretic text, is actually a corruption. And the way in which the Greek Septuagint arrives at 5554 BC for Creation Week is utilizing primarily the genealogies which are given in the Holy Scriptures. And actually, I always used to wonder, why are we seeing all these names of all these, Jewish or Hebrew patriarchs? Why do we see the long list of their names and all their ages and, who sired whom and how long each person lived and so on and so forth? Well, actually, that is the counting system for the eschatological timeline. Okay, it's embedded in the dates and successions of the Hebrew patriarchs. And of course, they use other evidence as well, found in various artifacts from the past, from ancient Sumer, from findings related to Noah's Ark, from the pyramids, and so on. Okay, so that's just with regards to the Greek Septuagint, which actually has more credibility than the Masoretic chronology amongst Christians, to my knowledge anyway. Again, I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, you can let me know. But that's my understanding. And I certainly do believe that there's a lot of credence to it, because there wasn't a political motivation for the writers and researchers of the Greek LXX. However, the Masoretic timeline was politically motivated because, as we know, the Jewish leadership, the Sanhedrin and the Pharisees, were Yeshua's arch enemies. So they had very strong interests against any timelines related to prophecies about Yeshua, his birth, his second coming, and the last days based on prophecies concerning Yeshua. Okay, so moving on then, the next main event in this timeline takes us to 2500 BC, which is when there was a baptism of water. And actually this concept of a baptism of water is from Clarence Larkin's commentary. And this baptism of water is Noah's flood. And Noah's flood lasted 40 days and 40 nights. So here we come across the concept of the 40-day wait. 40 days, 40 years. The number 40 is symbolic of a waiting period. Okay. Also, it also comes up at the time of the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt, where they wandered 40 years in the desert. Okay, so then the next critical date on this timeline is 936 BC, which is when the first temple was built by Solomon. And so after the building of the first temple, the next important event in this chronology is the destruction of that temple, that first temple, by the Babylonians in 586 BC. Subsequently, The second temple was completed in 349 BC. We then have the birth of Yeshua around the beginning of the period of AD, which actually is now called CE, or Common Era, because they're trying to get away from references to Yeshua in academia. Okay, but for this timeline, we're using BC and AD because we know whose authority we are under. Okay, so around 0 AD is the birth of Yeshua. His crucifixion is 30 AD. 65 AD, Nero's persecution of Christians begins, or is happening around that time. And then 70 AD concludes a 40-year wait. Okay, and this 40-year waiting period is from 30 AD, which was the year of Yeshua's crucifixion, to 70 AD, which is the year of Yeshua's second coming. Okay, so there again we see that 40-year waiting period. In 70 AD, the Romans destroyed Jerusalem and the Second Temple, which was also known as Herod's Temple. Okay, and 70 AD is also the year when Daniel's 1,290-day prophecy begins. That's Daniel chapter 12, verse 11 to 12. And it begins with the removal of the daily sacrifice. And most biblical scholars do agree that the daily sacrifice was removed with the destruction of Jerusalem and the Second Temple. There's another 40-year waiting period from 70 AD to 110 AD in this timeline, which begins in 70 AD, the 1,290-day years of days of Daniel. Okay, it begins with a 40-year waiting period, and it's a 40-year probation or tribulation after the fall of Jerusalem. During these 40 years, Rome is destroyed and earth is devastated. And this is where we see the apocalypse of the book of Revelation prior to the time when the saints are resurrected in the first resurrection, which is in Revelation 20. And so the period prior to that, where we see the horses riding, the seals opening, the vials being poured out, all of those were happening during this 40-year period. And I've gone into more depth on what occurs during that 40-year period in a previous video where I covered this period of time from the crucifixion. In fact, I also covered Daniel's 70-week prophecy in previous videos as well. But this is just an overview, because my main interest is to get to the end of this timeline as we go into the new earth. But I wanted to start from the beginning just to give you the big picture. Okay, so 70 AD to 110 AD is that 40-year waiting period, after which the millennial reign of Yeshua HaMashiach begins. And right before it begins, Satan is bound for 1,000 years. And this is when the theocracy of Yeshua begins on earth. In my reading of Daniel chapter 11, verses 40 to 45, and Isaiah chapter 11, it's very clear to me that these sections of these chapters are actually describing the millennial reign of Yeshua HaMashiach. And what really stands out in these verses is events involving conflicts that occur during Yeshua's millennial reign, because it was not a time of total peace and harmony. There were conflicts because not everyone was in total agreement with Yeshua being king on earth. Even though Satan was bound, what we have to remember is that we, as a fallen humanity, are born with original sin and therefore subject to temptation. Satan's role is to intensify our temptations and get us damned to hell. However, we, even with Satan being bound, we are still sinful beings, and we are still, many of us, unlike Adam, just want to be on earth and just make a whole new live a human existence on earth without Yahweh, okay, with man at the center of the universe, which of course Satan encourages greatly. But during this time, Satan was bound. And if we look at these verses, Daniel chapter 11, verse 40 to 45, and Isaiah chapter 11, as well as Daniel chapter 2, verse 44 to 45, we see again the discord and conflict that was happening during this time. The main point is that the law of Yah was supreme on earth, and Yeshua directly governed the world. So Daniel chapter 2, verse 44 to 45 describes the last kingdom, which breaks up and consumes all previous kingdoms. And this is the kingdom of Yeshua, which lasts forever. Now, we are in Satan's little season, right? Which comes after Yeshua's millennial reign. So if in the prophecy of Daniel it was written that the last kingdom was Yeshua's kingdom, well, he doesn't put it that way, but we can see based on what is written there that last kingdom was Yeshua's, and it lasts forever. And this is actually something that you can read in more detail about in Clarence Larkin's commentary. Is Yeshua king during the little season of Satan? Of course he is. However, Satan has been given the power to deceive us in this little season. And it's a way in which our souls are tested and weighted and measured for determination of what our eternal home, each of us, is going to be, what our eternal domain is going to be. Are we going to be in the eternal domain with Yahweh, or in eternal hell and torment, separated from Yahweh forever? Okay, so that is the purpose Satan serves. But we are still in the kingdom of Yeshua, except now he is not ruling directly as he did during his millennial reign. So Daniel chapter 11, verse 40 to 45 are verses that actually contain clues that the king of the north being referenced here is Yeshua, and that these verses are telling us about events and especially the conflicts that occurred during his millennial reign. And so it is written, and at the time of the end, Hamelech HaSaphon, which the Sefer scriptures translate as the king of the north or hidden king. Okay? And by the way, if you are only reading the King James Version of the book of Daniel, you won't really understand that the king of the north referred to in Daniel chapter 11 is a hidden king. Okay? Now, Daniel continues in chapter 11, verse 40 to 45. Hamelech HaSaphon shall come like a whirlwind, with chariots, and with horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. Okay, so we're actually seeing the kind of language here which is associated with Yeshua. Okay, we remember from the book of Enoch that Enoch was taken up to heaven by a chariot in a whirlwind. Okay, so there we have references directly related to phenomena involving heavenly entities. And then we also see that he will come like a whirlwind and he will pass over. Pass over is a word used symbolically here as a clue that the hidden king of the north of Daniel chapter 11 is Yeshua. And so it goes on, he shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the entire chief of the children of Ammon. So not all peoples and nations submitted to the rule of Yeshua during this time. Some of them were overthrown, some escaped his hand, his power. Okay? And it goes on to say, he shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Mitzrayim, Egypt, shall not escape. So Egypt did not escape from Yeshua's rule. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Mitzrayim. And the Libyans and the Cushiim shall be at his steps. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy, and utterly to make away many. Okay, so again, conflicts, adversity, which is not unusual for Yeshua. There was conflict and adversity at his first coming, ending in his crucifixion. Okay? And so Daniel 11 goes on, and he shall plant the tabernacles. Who else has tabernacles except our Most High Yahweh? Okay? And his son Yeshua. Okay? And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. Who else will be in the holy mountain planting his tabernacles there? And what is the holy mountain except Mount Zion? Okay? Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Okay? So, this is the hidden king in Daniel 11. And what is being described is the conflicts again during his millennial reign, and then how it ends again with conflict, and how he comes to his end at the end of the millennial reign. Because now the period of Satan's little season is ushered in, and Yeshua then reverts to his spiritual kingdom, reigning still supreme over the universe. However, for a time, the world is given over to the hand of the powers of darkness. Okay? All right, so I just wanted to share that with you. So go ahead and do your own reading of Daniel chapter 11, and of course the previous chapters of Daniel, and see whether you agree that Daniel 11 verses 40 to 45 are actually referring to Yeshua and his millennial reign. And in future I'll talk about the rest of that going into chapter 12, which of course brings us to the timelines of Daniel as well. So moving on with the timeline, Yeshua's millennial reign lasts 1,000 years from the year 110 AD until 1110 AD. So Satan's little season starts the following year, which is the year 1111. And this is where Daniel chapter 2, prophecy of the Antichrist figure thinking to change the laws and times, comes into play. Because Satan added 666 years to the calendar with his primary objective of hiding the fact that Yeshua's millennial reign had happened on earth. And this, of course, is his way of making sure that there would be no visual evidence or historical evidence of Yeshua's millennial reign, which would verify him, Yeshua, as being who he said he was. And it would also prove the Bible to be true. So Satan, of course, had to obliterate evidence that the Bible is true. So then, of course, he brings in his theory of evolution, and of course NASA is born as well, that space agency, which I came across a video on a channel called Leaving Babylon on YouTube, where she does a very interesting take on the second coming of Yeshua, like the false Yeshua during this time, because she does believe that Yeshua's millennial reign was in the past as well. But what she does say also in that video is that NASA is a Hebrew word meaning lead astray of all things. And I thought that was a real eye-opener, because that's just symbolic of the fact that we are in Satan's little season, a time when Satan has been loosed, and his main purpose is to lead the nations astray. Okay, so here Satan's released, and 666 years are added to the calendar. And of course, all of this continues happening during the 1,290 years of days, which then continue until 2026. They start in 70 AD and end in 2026, and that year is 2026 because of the years that were added to the calendar, the 666 years. Otherwise, our actual timeline would tell us that we are actually in the 14th century and not in the 21st century. We're in the year 13 something. Okay? So, but in any event, the important point here is that Satan added the 666 years so that the year 1111 became the year 1776. And Satan's little season, as I've mentioned in previous videos, is a 250-year timeline. And the understanding which I gleaned from the discernment of others who are studying this, including Alpha Talks, okay, I discerned that that the 250-year season is a quarter of the 1,000 years of Yeshua's millennial reign. A quarter of the 1,000 years is 250, which is parallel to the quarter of a year, which is the length of a season. Okay, so that is our understanding on why it is that Satan's little season is 250 years. Also because when we look at the 1,290-year timeline, that season of Satan, which started in the year 1111, cannot really be any longer than 250 years, because the timeline of the abomination of desolation, which also begins in the year 70 AD, that abomination does not extend beyond the 1,290 years of days. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit more detail about that shortly. But the 1,290 years do end in 2026, the 1,290 years of days. So where are we right now? We are obviously in 2024, and we have a couple of years to go before the 250-year little season comes to an end. And that's also the end of the 1,290 years of days. In 2024, some remarkable things have occurred. We have seen some biblical signs in the sky, which in Luke chapter 21, verse 25, we are told that signs in the sky herald the end of days. And the signs that we saw in the sky in 2024 herald the start of the last 7 years, which bring on judgments upon the enemies of Yahweh, and they do escalate, culminating in the final judgment in 2030. We had the solar eclipse of April 8th of 2024, where we saw Yahweh's mark Aleph Tav in the sky, and that particular eclipse was the final of 3 eclipses, which the points at which the trajectories of the 3 eclipses intersect marked the Aleph Tav of Yahweh in the sky. And we also had the blood moon on September 18th of 2024, which symbolically occurred at Yom Teruah, heralding, together with the solar eclipse or the black sun, heralding the day of Yahweh, as written in the book of Joel, verse 2, chapter 31. And this is the judgment of the enemies of Yahweh, and it is also not symbolic of, but heralds the deliverance of the remnant. Okay? Alright, so then We are certainly in the most remarkable of times, dear remnant, because 2026 is just a couple of years away. And that is actually the very end of Satan's little season. As of 2024, we have entered into the last 7 years, which end in 2030. In these last 7 years, by marking his sign in the sky, Yahweh is letting us know that he is bringing Satan's little season to an end, even as Satan is ramping up and gearing up to bring forth a counterfeit Armageddon based on prophecies already fulfilled before Yeshua's millennial reign. By 2026, again, Satan's little season is over. And I discern that after that time, there will be major and continuous outbreaks of truth in the world. The truth has already started decimating the power of deception in the world, even now. More Christians are studying Torah and discovering what the real mark of the beast is, and even, although at a slower rate, realizing that Yeshua's millennial reign is in the past. In my experience of Christians in my community and others that I've come across, there is a more ready acceptance of Torah observance than there is of Yeshua's millennial reign being in the past. And then there are those who accept Yeshua's millennial reign is in the past, but they don't accept that Torah is anything that we should be observing, because unfortunately they have the blinders on placed upon them during this little season of Satan. However, those scales, I do believe, are going to be falling from their eyes as outbreaks of truth decimate the power of deception. Now, let me just get to some scenarios that I see in these last years before the end, which is 2030. There are 3 timeline scenarios that I see from 2027 after Satan's little season ends. Okay? The first scenario is if Daniel's 1,335 prophecy is years, and these years began in 70 AD, then they overlap with the 1,290-day timeline. Therefore, 70 AD to 2026 is 1,290 of the 1,335 years. And of course, there we have added that phantom 666 years of Satan. Okay. Now, 2027 to 2030 are 5 of the 1,335 years of days. So in this scenario, there is a 40-year waiting period remaining after 2030. All right, scenario number 2. If Daniel's 1,335 prophecy is days, then 2027 to 2030 is 3.5 years, or 1,290 of the 1,335 days of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 13. When the 3.5 years end, there is still a 40-day waiting period left. Okay? I hope that's clear. Scenario number 3. In this scenario, the 1,335 years of days begin after the 1,290 years of days, meaning that the 1,335 days are years of days starting in 2027. Okay, which would mean, well, that at 2027 there are still 1,335 years to go before the end. Now, I believe that is very unlikely because the sanctuary is cleansed within 2,300 years of days from the building of Solomon's temple in 936 BC. This means that the sanctuary has to be cleansed by the year 2030. Therefore, the 1,335 years must either start in 70 AD and end according to the first scenario, which means that there would be a 40-year waiting period after 2030. Okay? Or scenario number 2 must be correct, that the 1,335 are literal days, or 3.5 years from 2027 to 2030, with a 40-day waiting period remaining.